Let's talk about something we're all feeling. Our cities are getting hotter. And I mean, way hotter. It's becoming a real crisis. But what if we could actually fight back against that heat with one of the most powerful new tools we have? Well, that's what we're diving into today. The battle between our sweltering cities and artificial intelligence. You know that feeling, right? That blast of heat that hits you when you walk onto a city street in the middle of summer is just suffocating. So you have to wonder, why is it so much worse in the city? The answer is a phenomenon that's literally turning our urban centers into giant ovens. And it has a name, the urban heat island effect. I mean, just think about it. Our cities are jungles of concrete, asphalt, and dark rooftops. All day long, these materials are just soaking up the sun's energy, and then they slowly bleed that heat back out all night long. The city itself basically becomes a giant heat trap.
And just how big of a deal is this? It's pretty staggering. At night, when our bodies are supposed to cool down and recover, a city can stay up to 10 degrees Celsius warmer. That's 18 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't just about being uncomfortable, this is genuinely dangerous.
And look, this is not some niche problem affecting a few places. By the year 2050, it's projected that a staggering 1.6 billion people living in almost 1,000 different cities will have to deal with extreme heat. We're talking about a global emergency here, and it demands a really powerful solution.
So, how in the world do you fight a problem this massive? Well, more and more, the answer involves artificial intelligence. But AI isn't some kind of magic wand you just wave at the problem. So let's pop the hood and see what it's actually doing to help cool our cities down.
Okay, so when it comes to fighting urban heat, you can think of AI as having 4 key superpowers. First, it's incredible at spotting hidden patterns in just massive amounts of data. Second, it can predict where and when heat waves are going to hit. Third, it can optimize how we use our resources, like where to put cooling centers. And finally, it can run simulations, letting us test out solutions before we spend a single dollar.
So, the way it works is actually pretty logical. First, the AI just vacuums up huge amounts of data. We're talking everything from satellite images to temperature readings to public health stats. Then its algorithms sift through all of that noise to find the real patterns, the hotspots and the most vulnerable neighborhoods. And finally, it uses those insights to predict problems before they happen and figure out the best way to respond. All right, so that's the theory. It sounds great, right? But does any of this actually work in the real world? Oh yeah, it does. Let's take a quick trip around the globe and see how 4 very different cities are putting this exact workflow into action to fight the heat. First up, we've got a tool with some serious scale. Google has actually developed a publicly available tool that uses its massive global data and AI to help basically any city on Earth pinpoint its most heat-vulnerable areas. What it does is it blends satellite imagery with that street-level data you see on Google Maps to create these incredibly detailed heat maps, right down to the individual city block. And the payoff for all this tech? Early cities that used it saw a 40% jump in how efficiently they could allocate resources. That means getting help exactly where it's needed the most.
Okay, so that's the big global picture. But what happens when you bring this kind of technology right down to the street level? Well, in Delhi, researchers used AI to empower a local community to cool itself down.
Get this, they used drones to map out the heat block by block in one of the city's most vulnerable neighborhoods. The AI then crunched that data to find the absolute best spots for things like cool roofs and community cooling centers. And the result? You could actually feel it, a 15% drop in peak temperatures in those areas.
Next up, we're heading to Barcelona, a city that's taken this a step further and woven AI right into the fabric of how the city is managed. They're not just reacting to heat anymore, they're getting ahead of it.
The city has this whole network of hundreds of sensors constantly feeding data into an AI model, and that model can predict a major heat wave a full 72 hours in advance. So what does that early warning mean for people's health? A stunning 25% reduction in heat-related emergency calls. That's a huge deal. Okay, our last stop is Phoenix, Arizona, one of the hottest major cities on the planet. And here, AI is being used to tackle a really critical issue, fairness, or, as they call it, heat equity. The AI crunched the data, and what it found was pretty stark. Low-income communities were way hotter and had far fewer resources, like parks and trees. So the city used that insight to identify 127 priority heat equity zones. Then they flooded those areas with targeted tree plantings and new cooling centers. The impact was just incredible, a 40% reduction in heat-related hospitalizations in those specific zones.
Now, after hearing all those amazing results, it's really easy to start thinking that AI is the perfect solution, right? But it's so important that we take a step back here for a reality check. Because this is not a magic silver bullet.
On the one hand, yeah, the promise is crystal clear. You get amazing accuracy, and you use your resources way smarter. But the problems are just as real. AI is totally useless without good, clean data. It can actually amplify our own human biases if we're not super careful. And let's be honest, these systems can be really expensive to build and maintain.
In this quote really hits the nail on the head. It's this idea of technological solutionism, the danger of thinking you can just drop a fancy algorithm on a neighborhood and call the problem solved. It's a powerful reminder that if the technology isn't designed with deep input from the community, it's probably going to fail the very people it's supposed to help.
So where does all this leave us? Well, the challenges are very real, but they don't mean we should just give up on the technology. They mean we have to be a whole lot smarter about how we use it. So what's the final verdict here? Well, despite all the hurdles, the jump in performance is just undeniable. This chart says it all, really. The old ways of predicting heat events, they're about 65% accurate. You bring in AI, that number leaps to over 90%. That is an absolute game changer when it comes to being able to prepare and protect people.
And what about the money? The economic case is just as strong. For every single dollar a city invests in this kind of tech, studies show a return of nearly $5 in benefits. We're talking everything from lower healthcare costs to major energy savings.
So the path forward has to be strategic, not just technological. It's about building a solid data foundation to start. It's about launching smart pilot projects and then scaling up what works. And, maybe most importantly, it's about always putting the community at the very center of the design process. It means we have to be smart, we have to be collaborative, and we have to stay focused on people.
And all of this brings us to the final, crucial question. When you look at the massive scale of the urban heat crisis, and you see the proven potential of these incredible new tools, well, the question really isn't whether our cities can afford to invest in AI. It's whether in a world that's getting hotter every year, they can possibly afford not to.